Bill Carroll of Zenny62 Sports Media, and we're going to go back into our, hopefully by popular demand, the Saturday Superlatives series. And I'm going to start with some coaches. Lincoln Riley, of course, is getting all the attention, and the reasons are obvious. He and Caleb Williams were the most celebrated quarterback and coach package in years, and for good reason. Addison showed up, 7 catches, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the USC team is 2-0 with a chance to have a 10 or even 11 win season, perhaps. And we'll see more in the future. But I want to focus on some of the coaches that maybe haven't gotten all of the attention they deserve. Now, Steve Sarkisian, a former USC coach, in a very tough and very tight loss by 1 point to Alabama, looked like the right man for the job. It looks like they've finally gotten it right, and if they give him time, I believe that he'll get Texas back to being a winner. But there's some other coaches who I think are doing a terrific job, and speaking of former USA coaches, look at what Clay Helton is getting done at Georgia State. The big win, and obviously the win that, I guess, ended the coaching career of Scott Frost. I think that Coach Helton got a little too much blame, as often happens, for what happened at USC. I think there were a lot of other sort of systemic things, and I agree that they fell off the track recruitment-wise, but I think he's a good X's and O's man. And then I want to spend a little time talking about Lance Leipold. Now, you have to go all the way back to the 51% winning percentage of Mark Mangino several coaches ago. Les Miles, Turner Gill, and many others have failed. I do believe that Lance Leipold, who has been successful pretty much every place he's been, will be successful at getting football back at least to the Glenn Mason, Mark Mangino level, 7, 8, sometimes even 9 wins for the Jayhawks. Now, let's talk football players, because that's what this whole thing is about. There are several players who just had off-the-charts amazing performances on offense, on defense, and on special teams. And Cedric Tillman, there were a lot of receivers that just had great games. Cedric Tillman had 9 catches for 160 yards and a touchdown, and just looked at times like a man amongst boys. Tennessee and Pitt was a really good game. We thought it would be, and it was everything we wanted, but he was a true standout. I think Incarnate Word, we worried, some of us, when Cameron Ward left, like what would happen without him. They're going to be okay. And playing up a level against Nevada, Darian Charclet was a man amongst boys again, right? But the difference is that he was supposed to be with the boys, and Nevada's supposed to be the men, but it turned out not to be the case. And I always pay attention to those FCS versus FBS matchups, because you get to see guys playing up a level. And 7 catches, 260 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The most impressive day I saw anybody have, bar none, quite frankly. Allie Jennings, wide receiver from Old Dominion, another program that I think people should pay a little more attention to, had 8 catches for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns with a long of 44, and he put himself firmly, I'll be watching more of him. I think might be the real thing. A young man I've been aware of since he was in high school is Kayla Lebron, who started his career at Florida State and then transferred to Marshall, and obviously Marshall had a big win, playing up a level of competition as well against Notre Dame. 31 carries, 163 yards, and, as I always have to say, 757 football, stand up. Parker McKinney of Eastern Kentucky had a really good game at the office, right? I think that's a guy that has a chance. 33 of 47, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and also 36 yards rushing. Just a real leader, and he came up when they needed it. Shenderick Powell of Northern Alabama had a nice game at the office. A nice day. Both a nice game and a nice day at the office. 20 carries for 251 yards and 4 touchdowns. Sam Hartman, and this is sort of the heartwarming, if you pardon the use of the term, moment, comes back from a potentially life-threatening issue regarding blood clots for 18 of 27, 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he has a very nice receiving group. Like we always talk about, USC has a great group of receivers, and Alabama usually has terrific receivers. Ohio State has a great group of receivers. But that group of Wake Forest, to me, is right there with whoever you want to mention, quite frankly. And I see big things for Wake Forest again this year. Maybe they don't win the conference. I think that, we see sort of a return to normalcy to some extent with Clemson. But Clemson's not invulnerable by any stretch of the imagination. And here's a nice feel-old moment for some of us. Certainly I'll count myself amongst the some of us. So Marvin Harrison Jr., that's right, the son of Marvin Harrison, is out there doing the thing. And he had 7 catches for 184 yards, 3 touchdowns. And he doesn't remind me so much of his father, though he has, clearly some of the characteristics that made his father great. But, I mean, he reminds me more of, and he's not finished growing and developing. I think that when it's all said and done, he's going to be, a manimal out there. I mean, he has a chance. He's listed at something like 205 now. He's going to get probably somewhere in the 2 teens before it's all said and done. And he could be a Larry Fitzgerald type, but faster. That's a terrifying thought, isn't it? Devin Leary is one of those guys that it doesn't always look pretty when he's doing it, but he is an effective guy. He's a good quarterback up from the pocket. He sees things fairly quickly, especially when the ball comes out quickly. I think he's efficient and effective, but he has enough talent and enough arm and surprising mobility. I sort of called him a rich man's Gardner Minshew, and I didn't mean that at all as an insult. I mean, a lot of the things that make a guy like Gardner Minshew good also make him good. He has a lot of things that I think, you look for in a guy that you would want to hand the keys of the car to, quite frankly. And so when he plays against anybody, and obviously he's playing a little level down, I guess you could say, with competition. No offense to Charleston Southern, but 16 to 25, 238, 4 touchdowns, and then just to see the way he operates that offense, and then, like I said, the added bonus of him showing he can beat you a little bit with his feet, makes him. I mean, he's a guy that I see sort of as a high-end backup, but if he ends up becoming a starter, I won't be shocked. A few other guys I just want to make sure I mention before we close this one out. Holy Cross. Once again, I love FCS, FBS games. Matt Sluka, their quarterback, 13 of 21, 238 yards, 5 touchdowns. Also had 13 rushes for 102 yards and another touchdown. He was an unstoppable killing machine. And speaking of killing, Ohio State, I'm not going to say that. I think they're going to be one of the teams in the Final Four. I think they're a college football playoff team, and they have a chance to run the table in the Big Ten, which is harder than it looks, even when the Big Ten is down. I think it might be a little down this year, but it's so hard, once again, just to maintain the same high level of play. But if C.J. Stroud continues to be like he was, 16 of 24, 351 yards and 4 touchdowns, that's going to be trouble. And I want to make sure that I shout out some small school guys. One is because they were ridiculous, and 2 because I don't think people pay enough attention to them. Jada Byers of Virginia Union hit my radar previously. He was the freshman of the year last year in the CIAA and played some of his best games against top competition. When they placed a ranked Chowan team last year, he had 228 yards on 33 carries and 2 touchdowns. And I thought that might be, the game of his career. Well, I was wrong, because against the number 2 team in Division II, the Valdosta State Blazers, who are a powerhouse year in and year out, he had 283 yards on 29 rushes. And then on top of that, 3 catches for 23 yards. And then on top of that, 16 yards in return yardage for 319 total yards, all purpose. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you get yourself on my Saturday Superlatives. We're going to do defense next.